Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says leaders of all the Muslim states should speak out against Islamophobia in the West. In an interview, Khan said only Pakistan and Turkey voiced their concern over the publication of blasphemous caricatures in France last year. He said a unified response will be more effective. The Pakistan Army says terrorists fired 5 rockets from across the Afghan border, killing a 5-year-old child in Babucruz. It says 7 minors, including a girl, were also wounded in the attack. In Pakistan, a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee says the country will continue supporting Kashmiris in their just struggle for self-determination. In a statement, the military's media wing said the meeting reaffirmed the resolve to counter all threats. It said the forum reviewed the regional geostrategic environment and operational readiness of the armed forces. The meeting was chaired by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, General Nadeem Raza, and attended by the 3 services chiefs. In Myanmar, a close aide to ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been detained in a new wave of arrests following last week's military coup. Thousands of protesters gathered across the country against the coup for a 6th straight day. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden also announced sanctions on Myanmar's military rulers over the last week's coup. The COVID-19 is hitting Latin America hard as Mexico and Brazil have each registered over 1,300 fatalities in the last 24 hours. In Pakistan, over 1,500 people tested positive and 57 lost their lives overnight as the death toll nears 12,200. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 2.35 million lives and infected over 107 million people so far. And in cricket, South Africa are chasing a target of 170 runs against Pakistan in the first T20 at the Gaddafi Stadium in Lahore. Mohammad Rizwan was the top scorer with unbeaten ton. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says leaders of all the Muslim states must speak out against Islamophobia in the West. In an interview, Khan said only Pakistan and Turkey voiced their concern over the publication of blasphemous caricatures in France last year. He has previously written to the leaders of Muslim countries asking them to act collectively to counter growing Islamophobia. Last year, Khan called on Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg to place a ban on hate against Islam, similar to that in place for the Holocaust. The Pakistan Army says terrorists fired 5 rockets from across the Afghan border, killing a 5-year-old child. In a statement, the military's media wing said 7 minors, including a girl, were also wounded in the attack. Pakistan has consistently been raising the issue with the Afghan authorities to check cross-border terrorist incidents. In Pakistan, a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee says the country will continue supporting Kashmiris in their just struggle for right to self-determination. In a statement, the military's media said the meeting reaffirmed the resolve to counter all threats. It said the forum reviewed the regional geostrategic environment and operational readiness of the armed forces. The participants of the meeting lauded the sacrifices rendered by security agencies in the fight against terrorism. The meeting was chaired by the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General Nadeem Raza and attended by the 3 services chiefs. Islamabad has called on the UN Security Council to take immediate action against Indian state-sponsored terrorism in Pakistan. Pakistan's UN envoy Munir Akram said Pakistan is the victim of terrorism, including that being directed by India. More in this report.
In a series of tweets, Akram urged the Security Council not to allow India to derail the ongoing intra-Afghan negotiations. He said India's statement to Council is a clear manifestation of its role as a spoiler in the Afghanistan peace process. The envoy said a recent UN report has validated Pakistan's actions against all terrorist groups. Akram also invoked the Council's Sanctions Committee against India for its disruptive role in the country and region. Pakistan has provided irrefutable evidence of India's support and financing of UN-designated terrorist organizations.
Indian troops murdered a 60-year-old civilian in occupied Kashmir's Baramulla district. The man was targeted during a military operation in the Uri area of the district. Meanwhile, Kashmiris are observing a complete shutdown to mark the martyrdom anniversary of a prominent leader, Maqbool Bhatt. More in this report.
From a teacher to a political activist and one of the loudest voices for Kashmir's freedom, Maqbool Bhatt's journey is an inspiration for Kashmir youth. 7 days before his 46th birthday, Bhatt, one of the beacons of Kashmir's freedom struggle, was executed by India. New Delhi had hanged Bhatt in Tihar jail in 1984 and buried him in the premises of the prison. The All Parties Hurriyat Conference says the sacrifices by Kashmiris will not be allowed to go waste and their mission will be accomplished at all costs. Mobile and internet services remained suspended, while a large number of occupying forces have been deployed in Srinagar city and elsewhere to stop the protest rallies.
Pakistan has condemned the US State Department's tweet that referred to Jammu and Kashmir as India's part. The Foreign Office said Kashmir is recognized as a disputed territory as per numerous UN Security Council resolutions. It said Kashmir is one of the oldest items on the agenda of the UNSC, which remains unresolved because of India's unwillingness to fulfill its commitments. It said economic progress of Kashmiris is linked to the realization of their right to self-determination. It said the US and the international community must urge India to stop its systematic human rights violations in the occupied valley. Pakistan has conducted a successful training launch of Babucruz missile. The missile was test launched from a state-of-the-art multi-tube missile launch vehicle. The missile has a range of 450 kilometers. It is capable of engaging targets at land and sea with high precision. The joint military exercises of Pakistan military's Special Services Group troops and Turkish Special Forces are underway in Tarbela. The drills, titled Ataturk 11, will continue for 3 weeks. The military drills are focusing on counter-terrorism, cordon and search, fire and move techniques, and close quarter battle. Helicopter repelling, compound clearance, and free-fall operations are also part of the exercises. Pakistan military's media wing says the joint military exercises will further strengthen the bond between the two nations. The International Naval Exercise AMN 2021, comprising of the navies of 43 countries, has started in Karachi, Pakistan. Pakistan Naval Chief Admiral Mohammad Amjad Khan Niazi said the established norms of zero-sum security thinking needs a paradigm shift. Admiral Niazi called on the world to come together and fight the common enemy. Meanwhile, the AMN series this year is titled as Together for Peace. The exercises are aimed at promoting regional cooperation and stability. The exercises will exhibit a united resolve against terrorism and crimes in the maritime domain, including piracy. India's opposition party, Congress, has slammed Prime Minister Narendra Modi for not addressing the concerns of the protesting farmers during his speech in the parliament. Talking to the media, Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary said over 206 farmers have lost their lives, but the Prime Minister is not willing to say anything about it. Congress spokesperson Randeep Surjewala said Modi's commitment to the welfare of farmers is highly questionable. Earlier in his speech, Prime Minister Modi questioned the legitimacy of the farmers' movement. All 11 rounds of talks between the BJP government and farmers have failed. The Modi government refuses to repeal the contentious new farm laws, but the farmers say they won't settle for anything less. The Taliban have accused the Afghan government of killing at least 22 civilians over the past 2 weeks. In a statement, the Taliban says 69 others were injured as the government troops carried out 42 attacks. They said that deliberate artillery, air and ground strikes in 22 Afghan provinces forced many to evacuate their homes. The statement read that the bombardments also demolished or damaged 29 homes, 2 health clinics and other civilian infrastructure. The Taliban condemned the attacks, calling them crimes against humanity. The group also called on all the involved parties and the world to play their role in preventing civilian oppression and deaths. US President Joe Biden has announced sanctions against Myanmar's military rulers over last week's coup. In a press conference, President Biden called on the military to release all the leaders and activists. Protesters returned to the streets of capital Naypyidaw after clashes during the anti-coup demonstrations yesterday. Hundreds of government workers marched in support of a civil disobedience campaign that has also been joined by doctors. Meanwhile, the United States and the United Nations have condemned the use of force against the protesters. The US sanctions will block Myanmar military's access to $1 billion of government funds held in the US. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. China's President Xi Jinping says confrontation between Beijing and Washington will be disastrous for both the countries. President Xi Jinping said this during his first phone conversation with US counterpart Joe Biden.
President Xi cautioned Biden over matters related to Taiwan, Hong Kong and Xinjiang. He said both sides should re-establish the means to avoid misjudgments and manage disputes constructively. For his part, Biden told Xi that it was a U.S. priority to preserve a free and open Indo-Pacific region. In a statement, the White House said the two leaders also exchanged views on shared challenges, including pandemic and climate change. Meanwhile, during his first visit to the Pentagon, President Biden said the U.S. military is undertaking a comprehensive review of its strategic position against China. Biden said a new China task force will be formed to look at Washington's strategy and future posture.
Russia has called on the United States to stop saber rattling with recent drills in the Black Sea. Earlier, the US and Turkish warships had held joint drills in the Black Sea. In a tweet, the Russian embassy in Washington said the US desperately looks for a pretext for ramping up a presence in the region. The embassy said the US should mind its business in its own waters. It added the peace and security of the Black Sea needed no alien interference. Moscow has repeatedly said the military presence of off-region nations in the Black Sea threatens regional stability. Meanwhile, the Turkish Defense Ministry said the drills strengthen cooperation between the two naval forces. As former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial enters its second day at the U.S. Senate, House managers argued that Trump's comments to supporters before the Capitol riots amounted to incitement of insurrection. The impeachment managers methodically pieced together the violence using Trump's own words and tweets against him. They argued that Trump left members of Congress for dead during the Capitol Hill riots. The leader of the Democratic prosecution team, Jamie Raskin, called Trump the inciter-in-chief of the anarchy on the 6th of January. In the U.S. state of Georgia, prosecutors have opened a criminal probe into former President Donald Trump's bid to influence the state's 2020 election. This is the most serious probe Trump is facing after being recorded pressuring the Secretary of State to overturn his Georgia laws over a phone call. Fulton County prosecutors ordered officials to preserve documents related to the administration of the state's November 3rd election. They also notified the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and Governor Brian Kemp of the investigation. The probe includes potential violations of Georgia's law prohibiting the solicitation of election fraud. Earlier on Monday, Raffensperger also launched his own fact-finding investigation of the call. COVID-19 is hitting Latin America hard as Mexico and Brazil have each registered over 1,300 fatalities in the past 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus pandemic has claimed over 2.35 million lives and infected over 107 million people so far. More on the pandemic in this report.
Production challenges, supply chain issues, and uncertainties of a vaccine, coupled with the rapidly spreading highly complicated coronavirus variants, mar the battle against COVID-19. The Canadian province of Newfoundland has gone from COVID-free sanctuary to circuit breaker lockdown as it faces its largest outbreak. In the US, Los Angeles is temporarily closing one of the country's largest vaccination sites at Dodger Stadium, among 4 others due to a lack of doses. California, the US state with the highest number of COVID-19 deaths, has detected 2 cases of the South African mutant of the virus. Down south, Argentina has become the 12th nation to surpass 2 million coronavirus cases amid a host of problems involving the vaccination drive. A new report has found that children in Germany, especially from underprivileged backgrounds, are suffering from psychological issues due to the pandemic. However, Chancellor Angela Merkel has announced to again extend restrictions against COVID-19 until March 7. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has recommended the AstraZeneca vaccine even in the regions where the variant first found in South Africa is present. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has welcomed the organization's recommendation after some countries questioned its efficacy.
And let me stress that these vaccines are safe and effective, and it was good to see the World Health Organization today confirm its support for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for use in everyone over the age of 18 and obviously everyone over 65, and also supporting the 12-week interval between the 2 doses. Indeed, they say the longer interval provides greater protection.
However, South Africa is considering trading its doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine and deploying Johnson & Johnson shots instead. Over in Australia, the Victoria state has ramped up contact tracing in Melbourne after a new COVID-19 cluster grew to 8 cases.
Well, Pakistan has recorded another 57 deaths from COVID-19, raising the death toll to 12,185. The Health Ministry says 1,502 new infections have been detected overnight. The ministry said the total number of cases detected in the country has crossed 559,000. So far, over 516,000 people have recovered from the disease. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has topped 30,000. In Pakistan, a special search and rescue mission will be looking for the missing mountaineers. Pakistan's Muhammad Ali Satpara, John Snorri from Iceland, and Juan Pablo Moore from Chile remain missing since they summited K2 last Friday. Special forward-looking infrared will be used for the search mission. High-altitude climbers are also engaged for ground search as a result of any location spotted through FLIR mission. Earlier, Pakistan assured Chile of all possible efforts to rescue the missing climbers. Nepal has revoked the Everest summit certificates of 2 Indian climbers for faking their 2016 ascent. Officials say the climbers, along with their team leader, are now banned from mountaineering in the country for 6 years. They said the climbers failed to produce any evidence, including photos of their ascent. They added that their investigations with other climbers revealed that the 2 never reached the summit. Earlier, Narendra Singh Yadav and Seema Rani Goswami said they reached the top of the world's highest peak in the 2016 spring season. Nepal's tourism department subsequently certified their claim at that time. Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar has urged Greece to refrain from raising tensions. Speaking in the northeastern city of Kars, he said Athens must stop using threatening language and moves that don't contribute to diplomacy. Akar said Turkey expects third parties to be reasonable on the issue of the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. Athens and Ankara have been at odds over a number of issues, including the extent of their continental shelves. Turkey has rejected maritime boundary claims made by EU member Greece and Cyprus. Last month, Turkey and Greece launched exploratory talks to address disputes related to the rights in the Eastern Mediterranean. Iran's envoy to Pakistan, Mohammad Ali Hosseini, has expressed his country's resolve to continue confronting unilateralism and pressure from the United States. He was speaking exclusively to Indus News correspondent Manahil Ahmed on the occasion of the 42nd anniversary of Iran's revolution in 1979. More details in this report.
The day is celebration of Ayatollah Khomeini's return from exile and end of Mohammad Reza Shah's last government giving birth to an Islamic republic. The revolution was unusual for the surprise it created throughout the world, but for Iranians, it was something to cherish on. This year's celebrations come when the country grapples not only with COVID-19 pandemic, but also tense ties with the United States. Iran's envoy to Pakistan, Mohammad Ali Hosseini, says Iran's revolution has survived despite all U.S. conspiracies.
Foreign countries like the U.S. were involved in Iran's internal matters the most. Terrorist groups and organizations were supported to break Iran. In the past 4 decades, America continued its rivalry with Iran by imposing all sorts of sanctions on Iran. However, the revolution remains a message to the world that the people of Iran can make decisions for themselves.
Ambassador Hosseini said Iran has flourished in different sectors despite U.S. sanctions.
Iran is one of the leading countries in nanotechnology. Similarly, we are ranked 16th globally in scientific progress and are also dominating in the field of aerospace. Likewise, with little resources, we achieve notable success in atomic energy.
The ambassador also hailed bilateral relations between Iran and Pakistan and said the two neighbors are bonded by mutual respect.
Iran was the first country to recognize the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Since then, the relationship between the two countries have been mutually beneficial. Pakistan and Iran share a relationship of neighbors, brotherhood, friendship, and togetherness.
The ambassador said Iran has extended the hand of peace and friendship to all free and right-seeking nations in the region and beyond, as it believes in a shared future based on respect for all. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
Moving on to Lebanon, where Prime Minister-designate Saad al-Haridi has discussed his country's political crisis with the French President Emmanuel Macron. In a tweet, Haridi said he met Macron in Paris to seek assistance in resolving Lebanon's crisis. Haridi said he discussed possible ways to overcome the obstacles he is facing in forming the government. He acknowledged French efforts to gather international support to resolve Lebanon's economic difficulties. The two leaders also discussed Haridi's efforts to restore Lebanon's relations with other Arab countries. Macron has been spearheading international effort to rescue the former French colony for its deepest crisis since the 1975 to 1990 civil war. The United States says it will turn away most migrants apprehended at its border with Mexico under a Trump-era policy. At a news briefing, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said it was not the right time for new migrants to come to the U.S. border. Psaki said the move is aimed at limiting the spread of the coronavirus. She added it will also give the Biden administration time to implement humane asylum processing systems. Psaki noted that asylum processes will not occur immediately at the border.
Due to the pandemic and the fact that we have not had the time as an administration to put in place a humane, comprehensive process for processing individuals who are coming to the border, now is not the time to come. And the vast majority of people will be turned away. Asylum processes at the border will not occur immediately, will take time to implement.
The comments come amid increasing pressure on President Joe Biden to reverse the restrictive policies of his predecessor, Donald Trump. Now moving on, China's Tianwen-1 probe has successfully entered the orbit around Mars after completing the nearly 7-month voyage from Earth. The China National Space Administration says the development marks the country's completion of a key step in its Mars mission. The probe, including an orbiter, a lander and a rover, will take about 10 Earth days to complete one full orbit of the planet. The spacecraft will now enter a temporary orbit, surveying landing sites in preparation to land on Mars in May or June. Wang Shuang, chief designer of Tianwen-1, said entering the orbit was challenging and autonomous control was the key to the success of this mission.
Entering Mars's orbit is a challenging task. The key is the probe's autonomous control. Scientists have preset an entry program on the probe. When approaching Mars, the probe will finish the orbital entry process by itself. The probe will circle around the planet, which means communication will be difficult once it reaches Mars's far side. Even if we sent a signal from Earth, it wouldn't reach the probe in time. So the probe will need to solve most major malfunctions, if there are any, that arise according to these preset programs.
The European Space Agency has congratulated China on Tianwen-1's successful orbit entry. And now moving on, the Spring Festival TV Gala in China is set to reach its final live broadcast today on the eve of the Lunar New Year celebrations in the country.
This year's Spring Festival Gala of China Media Group boasts a record number of dance programs which will incorporate new technologies. The gala will be the biggest stage in the program's history and a combination of 5G, 8K HD, artificial intelligence and virtual reality technologies. The event will focus on current hot topics, social development and people's lives. It will also present the course of the Communist Party of China over the past 100 years and its achievements. Following tradition, the gala will also highlight some of the most important events from the past year. More than 600 media outlets from over 170 countries and regions will broadcast and report the show. The gala, also known as Tianwen in Chinese, has been broadcast live annually since 1983. It is the most important cultural symbol of the Chinese Lunar New Year and the most watched television program in the world.
While the pandemic has halted routine businesses around the world, dogs in Austria enjoy pampering at fancy salons. More in this report.
It is hairy times for Austrian hairdressers as they came out of lockdown this week, grappling with coronavirus testing and capacity restrictions. But the city's pampered dogs continue to enjoy getting a trim. Dog salons were allowed to stay open throughout the last 2 of Austria's 3 lockdowns. Now there is no requirement for owners to show a negative coronavirus test result as they would at the hairdresser.
Some of the owners are not as well groomed as their dogs are because dogs come and see me every 6 to 8 weeks. However, humans, they have not seen a hairdresser in a long time, and I think that might take a little while longer now that a negative coronavirus test is required.
A dog salon owner says it is completely justified that they have been allowed to work regularly. She says if the dogs do not get a trim, their hair becomes totally snarled and so close to the body that they have to be shaved. As for the dog owners, Zlatka Kuller and her 6-year-old Yorkshire Terrier Archie seems to love the job done at the salon.
So I typically go every 6 to 8 weeks. For a trim and bath and professional, because whatever you do at home, it's never on the same level. Okay, so and she really does a terrific job. I mean, he's ready to go on a show. Okay, after he's done. Okay.
The salon's owner says the closure during the first lockdown had created a backlog and it then had twice the work. Now the business is slower than usual as some customers are worried about getting infected.
It's a time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Lows and the highs of the business world now. U.S. stocks have inched higher as the market looked to continue February's momentum. Investors bet on more fiscal stimulus to ride out a coronavirus-driven recession, with data showing sluggish labor market recovery. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is trading higher by 0.25%, while the S&P 500 has gained about 0.33%. The Nasdaq Composite is trading higher by about 0.5%. Meanwhile, oil prices fell, giving up some of the recent strong gains, although losses were curbed by production cuts and hopes that rollouts of vaccines will drive a recovery in demand. Time to take a look at the weather situation from around the world. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.